All right there. Hey, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of The Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to another installment of our How Do You Do Data episode number 35 of I Love Data Fridays. And hey, who's talking data to you today? Well, of course, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, Director and Principal Investigator here at the International Data Evaluation Center. And I will be playing an interview that I did with Heather Garland, teacher leader from Oldham County, Kentucky. And today, Heather and I, on this installment of How You Do Data, she and I will be talking about, Heather's efforts to push her teachers to become leaders within her schools. All right. So, and with one of the goals in mind was to make her teachers indispensable to the schools that they are in and the administration that they were working with. And so we talk about the various efforts to do that, what worked so well, what maybe didn't work so well. And then we finally kind of wrap things up and we talk about how that has changed her role as a teacher leader. So without any further delay, here is my interview with Heather Garland. All right, so go ahead and let's just, Heather, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Heather Garland, and I'm a teacher leader in Oldham County, Kentucky. This is my 8th year, I believe, as teacher leader. I trained in 2002 as a reading recovery teacher, started teaching in 1999. So truly, my entire career has pretty much been reading recovery.
Okay, and so I love it. So first of all, Heather, I'm going to say thank you for agreeing to be on I Love Data Fridays. I just remember at the conference when I was just like, Heather, you got to be on I Love Data Fridays. You looked at me like, really? Do I have to be? And I'm like, yes, you have to be. So
here I am.
Thank you for letting me talk you into it. So,
So
as I was saying before we hit the record button here, we're going to start with the softball question.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know which question it is. So we're all just dying to know what you've been watching lately on Netflix.
Just finished up watching the Lorena and John Bobbitt series. Highly recommended if you want to have haunting dreams later on, I guess.
Okay.
Learn more than you want to know about John Bobbitt for sure.
Okay, good. All right. I always ask that because I'm always trying to find stuff to put in my.
So what did you just watch?
I have not been watching a lot of stuff on Netflix lately. I have a favorite video game I like to play. It's called Overwatch. It's like a first-person shooter game, but it's team-based and everything. And they have like a whole league with it, an Overwatch league, and professional esports. So this year's Overwatch League just started up, and you can ask my family. I've been watching it like it's football or something.
Okay. So you watch, you don't participate?
I do play. I mean, I don't play professionally, but I play, but I also watch the league as well. So.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Go Shanghai Dragons. That's my team. So. All right. Let's talk about reading recovery here. You've seen in emails and stuff that I've sent out, and I'll briefly state here that, Heather was talking to me at the national conference about sort of her efforts to really get her teachers to become leaders in their schools. And Heather, I love it. You sent me this, you gave me like the perfect title and everything in your outline. Heather sent me an outline for today's interview. I love it. But you started with, began with the end in mind. And I love that. So why don't you tell me a little bit how, coming into your site, what was that like?
Well, when I started, I had been a reading recovery teacher for about 8 years. So I was starting to hear talk whenever I started as teacher leader just about vintage sites and vintage teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be prepared for when my teachers became vintage. So I started kind of with that in mind, because I, in some ways, was reaching that vintage point as a teacher myself. And my main experience is, I was seen as that teacher down the hall that just fixed the kids, and I wasn't ever seen as a leader because of the way reading recovery was in my district that I was currently in, and also the school. So I kind of started with trying to think about how I could get my teachers involved in leadership at the beginning. And actually, the district that I became teacher leader in, it's completely district funded. So the teachers that were hired into reading recovery were teachers that had leadership qualities to them, and they also had a vision of seeing teachers as leaders. Um,
Okay.
and so actually, I mean, I'll just go here, but their second year, they were coaching teachers, which I think was a little too soon,
Mm-hmm.
but it was all about, because they had something called Reading Academy that was through Bellarmine University. So they were supposed to be supporting teachers that were going through this when they were still really new themselves, but at least the district saw them also as leaders, or wanted them to be. That was kind of their vision too.
Okay. So you're saying, like, there was a little bit already in the site itself. There was at the school district level an expectation already set that the teachers, your teachers, were expected to have some sort of leadership role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But I knew that was easier said than done.
Then done. Yeah. Yeah. Can you explain to me what the Reading Academy is?
The Reading Academy was something our district had, along with Jefferson County, which is Louisville, Kentucky, had a partnership with Bellarmine University.
Mm-hmm.
So the teachers were taking courses through something they called the Reading Academy. And there were teachers from Oldham County, I think, that were teaching cohorts here in the district. But then the Reading Recovery teachers were to come alongside teachers that were in the Reading Academy and kind of coach them all. Elkonin boxes, I remember being discussed a lot. Just kind of the reading recovery elements were somewhat addressed within the Reading Academy. So they were supposed to just help and support and coach those teachers. I honestly wasn't involved, so I can't say everything about it.
Okay.
I just know that was a role that they put them in their second year after they trained as reading recovery teachers.
Okay. All right. So now, when I look over your type or your outline here, so it seems like or when we talked before, part of you kind of, I don't want to say one day you sat down and you kind of thought about how you're going to do this, but it seemed like you were telling me that, like, there were a few things you wanted to avoid reading recovery being sort of like thought as, like, you're saying avoid being thought of as expensive and stuff. And I guess give me your initial thoughts of, like, how you started down this road.
Well, I knew they would be seen as expensive.
Yeah.
So reading recovery is always seen as expensive. It's funny that, interventionists that have no formal training are never seen as expensive, but a reading recovery teacher is considered expensive. So I just knew that they would be viewed as expensive, and that partly came from my experience before, because I was in a position in my former district where I was grant funded by the Read to Achieve grant, and my principal liked to come along and tell me every year that they might not have funding the next year, and that she might have to put me back in the classroom, which, that's one reason why I chose to leave when I had the opportunity, because I got tired of being told by my principal that I was going to be put back in the classroom, when she just wanted a reason to not have to renew teachers that weren't tenured yet. So
yeah,
I just wanted them, I shouldn't have told all that about myself, but I just wanted them to be seen as indispensable. I felt dispensable by my principal. So I wanted my teachers to not be viewed as dispensable. I wanted them to become integrated into their schools, so that if reading recovery funding discussions were discussed, then principals would say, no, I want my reading recovery teacher. We've got to figure out what to do, but that person is a non-negotiable.
I got you. So, like, I mean, your first step, maybe that's not the first step, but what you're saying is that, you've reflected back a little bit on your past experiences with your principal coming down the hall and saying, well, we don't know if we're going to need you next year. And
and it was pretty much a yearly conversation.
Okay.
So I just didn't want my teachers to have to face that. I wanted them to just be something that principal could not live without.
Okay. Um, so now you've got, sort of this idea of you want your teachers to be indispensable. What are the initial steps then you sort of started to do to try to make this happen?
Well, my leadership style is one that I like to see myself on the bottom as a support person versus the person at the top leading.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to try to figure out their strengths, and I like to kind of push them in a way that's going to help them be successful. So within my monthly PD sessions, we did do quite a few book studies in the beginning. And I was I don't know if I was anal, but I did not like it whenever they just created a PowerPoint that regurgitated the information that we read. I tried to really encourage conversation, facilitate the discussion, get us deeper into the topic with questions that you had, or that you can propose to the group that might get their thinking. So I always was trying to get them to think and not and really truly become leaders. So within our small group, it was more about that leadership, because I
Oh,
knew they had to feel comfortable there before they could go into a bigger setting. So
okay.
we did a lot of those.
So you had your teachers actually lead the book studies, is what you're
More
saying?
so, yes, yes, and there was
Okay.
accountability in there too. But they were all very, because they were the top of the cream of the crop whenever they were hired. A lot of them, you know, they were a little bit competitive themselves, and they did read everything. But sometimes teachers don't read; they just pretend. So,
Uh,
what was
good.
so funny?
No, I because at times I keep seeing uh a lot reading recovery has this way they recruit the at times the overachievers, which is I think is great.
Yes,
I mean, that's the
yes,
person.
yes,
I'm
yes,
I'm just I'm just laughing because the theme is just reoccurring over again. So,
yes.
and this is good. This is not me like ho ho. Why did they do that? No,
Right,
it's a strength. Yeah.
right.
Um. All right. So then, in your notes here, you said then you also had them start facilitating
Yes, the
the professional
professional. But yeah,
development.
because I am also, I don't know everything. Um, and I don't ever pretend like I do. So I tried, within those book studies, they were responsible for leading. So I would lead the behind the glass, but then I tried to shift it so that it wasn't my voice that was heard all day, that they were hearing different voices, and they were designing our professional development. um, you know, just a
Hmm.
little bit at a time. And then, once we had done the book studies for a few years and they'd really increased their knowledge base of literacy, I guess last year we switched to inquiry groups, because I could just tell, they were kind of over the book studies. I was too. And so I came up with just a plan for them, that they had to, within their groups, they could choose. We had several different topics. They could either focus on dyslexia, the new literacy lessons book, writing, or the next step in forward and guided reading. Those were kind of their areas, and they got to choose which group they wanted to join. And they also had the option of creating their own, but everybody pretty much gravitated to one of those. And then within it, they had to come up with their own norms. They had to decide, what their goals and objectives were, what their outline was going to be, how were their sessions going to go, what were they going to learn. So they became in charge of their own individual learning, and it really did increase their, I guess, like I felt like there was a resurgence a little bit in their interest when we had PD. It wasn't just something they had to sit through anymore. It was something they were more engaged with because they had more ownership.
Yeah, yeah. It
And
increased
then
their
they
buy-in into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they had to have a way to kind of disseminate that information. Like, were they going to share? There was one group, the dyslexia group, at the same time they were conducting a book study, because that had been our book that we had studied the year prior as a whole group. So then they took it to their school and let teachers and with their principal the principal allowed those two to facilitate a book study within their building, and the teachers got professional development credit that way. So they
Okay.
were, and then at the end they had to kind of share with the whole group how what they did within their individual groups and those kind of things. And the next step forward in guided reading, that group actually kind of became an advocacy group.
Uh-huh.
That's what they kind of evolved into once they got through the book. Then they kind of started advocating a little bit with the superintendent and board members and things like that for reading recovery. So.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me take 2 steps back here. So
Okay. Sorry.
no. I want to make sure I'm understanding. So it seems like in the beginning, like your sort of first steps to get them to. I mean, you've said that you actually already had some natural leaders in this group.
Oh, definitely, yes.
But to get them to feel comfortable about stepping up more in front of a group, or in this case with just amongst their peers, your book studies were facilitated by you, but not necessarily led by you, but you were certainly there pushing things along a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have my own agenda too, but as much as possible, I tried to let them lead it, because I didn't want it to always be my voice.
Right. Did you pick topics though, or did you let them pick topics?
I would usually survey the group, or just whatever. Like 3 years ago, we did Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz, because our district, that was becoming a big issue within the schools with outside testing that parents were going for, and also at the state level. So that one was kind of a general, everybody wanted to know more. So it was a good one.
Okay. And then when you moved into the inquiry groups, this was certainly less facilitated by you and more driven by the teachers themselves, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right.
And
And
I
then
just got to go from group.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, I just got to be a part of the different groups and learn and listen from them. So
Okay.
I was definitely in that supporting role where they were the ones taking the leadership and the ownership of their learning.
And then you said that you had the individual groups present to the rest of the teachers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So I'm trying to paint like not a small progression, but the individual steps here. That it seems like the first initial steps were you were there to handhold and push and kick people up in front, and then this inquiry groups, you had to do a lot less of that, it sounded like.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were at a place where I think they were happy to take on that learning themselves, because they all don't want to learn the same thing. I mean, so
Right.
I had to honor those individual interests of the group.
Okay. So now then your next bullet point talks about like professional developments, like within the buildings outside of your training classes. Now we're talking about moving in the buildings.
Well, that's where we are this year.
Okay.
So I kind of took the concept of the inquiry groups last year, and I honestly didn't know what it would look like after last year.
Uh-huh.
But after we went through that process, and also just, the district level, I wanted them to be in their buildings as much as possible. So we only meet for half a day now instead of a full day. And what I told them was we needed to stop having church, and they needed to be out in their buildings, because they would always come together and kind of complain and say, this isn't happening here. And they knew everything. So I'm like, okay, well, then it's time to go out and do, instead of us coming together as a group and just talking inside of our room. You've got to talk in your buildings. So this year, and I used district data. It was my main motivation with this, because DRA data across the district for the last 2 years had been showing, and that's I think about how long they've been looking at it as like a whole, but had been showing that second grade there was this dip in student performance with the DRA. And so the comments that you would hear occasionally throughout the district, well, that means reading recovery doesn't work. That means reading recovery doesn't work. So to me, it doesn't mean that reading recovery doesn't work, because we're not that impactful on the whole grade level, where only that was 20%. But to me, it showed that second grade teachers needed more support and they needed to increase their efficacy. So I really encouraged them, if at all possible, to work with their second grade teams and help them with literacy. So I did have one school in particular that just took this on, and not all of them did. Some of them just partnered up with one teacher, but there's one school in particular that their data had been kind of low, and they decided to do coaching cycles. They had 4 classroom teachers, 2 reading recovery teachers. So they took 2 teachers and focused with them for like a 6-week coaching cycle where they went in and taught the next steps in guided forward and guided reading, that lesson planner, with the teacher while she watched, and then they kind of co-taught it, and then it just lessened until that teacher was the one doing it and the reading recovery teacher was that support person. And I'll tell you, I recently got information that they have, the principal said they had the most growth in the entire school, second grade did.
Wow.
On MAP data and DRA data, I believe, because, they just really went in, and these kids have been in guided reading groups. And we actually had one of the classroom teachers come and share with our reading recovery group at the last meeting with these other 2 teachers, because they presented it to all of us. And she was talking about just how much she learned and how every kid is getting, guided reading from her now throughout the week, based on need. And it was transformational, I think, for that second grade team. So now they won't be saying there that reading recovery doesn't work. And there are different things that have happened. They all have different needs in the different buildings, but that would probably be my best example for this year on success there.
Okay. So, but I think that.
Okay, never mind. I have another school that.
Okay.
Kindergarten, and they call it the K Academy. So every kindergartner in this school, and they came in, their Brigance data was the lowest they'd seen in years. But I was there at the beginning of October and watched, and kids were already reading, kindergartners that had the lowest Brigance data, because they are working with the reading recovery teachers, and each kid is getting, small group instruction for at least an hour a day in guided writing, guided reading, I guess shared reading and something else. I don't know, but they're very intentional there as well. So those would probably be the 2 best examples of how that PD, not with our group, but within your building, to build that efficacy, is making a big impact, on all children in a grade level.
Okay. No, that's great. What the kindergarten data? What data are they looking at?
They always look at Brigance data coming into the school year.
Is that another like type of literacy assessment? I'm not familiar with it.
It's kind of more, are they developmentally ready? Do they know body parts? Can they count? Can they stand on one foot? Can they draw a circle?
Okay.
It's got a variety of different things on it, but that's what they use for kindergarten readiness.
I got you. It's kind of like a whole kindergartner assessment. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I had never heard of that one before.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
See, I don't know everything. So
that's why we're always learning.
Yeah. So did you? It almost sounds like you didn't really have anyone in your group resisting this. Did you? But did you? I mean, did you have anybody?
Well, I don't know if they are as resistant as much as some schools. The teachers that are in the building by themselves that don't have another reading recovery teacher, I think they've had a more difficult time because it's just them.
Right.
And they can't have the impact that 2 can have, because there's not like that planning teamwork that you can do and come up with ideas. And so those are more like, you might have a teacher in a building by herself that's just working with one classroom teacher. And and there is one that a lot of reading recovery kids go into a certain second grade classroom. So that teacher is totally working mainly with that second grade teacher in order to help her with small groups and whatever else she might need. So she's just impacting one classroom versus the whole second grade. And some are just working with their literacy coaches and trying to partner there. And then one school has a new principal. So they're really just trying to figure out how's it going to work with this new principal too. So every school has its own dynamics that you have to factor into.
Well, see now, yeah, you've you've clicked something interesting in my mind. I'm going to go slightly off topic here.
Okay.
Is that so? I get not regularly, but at least a few times a year, like a request that shows that more reading recovery teachers will like impact the discontinuing rate, or that 2 reading recovery teachers have a much larger impact than it's not so much they have like twice the impact. They actually have more than twice the impact.
Yes, I
But
agree.
it in reading recovery data, it never really manifests itself like that.
Hmm.
Um, like the number of teachers in a school isn't really a predictor for having a higher percentage of kids discontinued. It just means you'll get more kids discontinued, but the percentage usually stays the same. But what I'm hearing, which is I can't really show it in our data, but what I think I heard you say was something like, the 2 teachers, reading recovery teachers in a school, have a much more profound impact on the grades around them. Like
Yes. Hmm.
your single teachers are working with a classroom, a teacher,
Right.
but your 2 teachers are actually working with the entire grade level or
Right.
something.
Yeah. And so the school that has, the second grade emphasis and focus, that's 2 teachers. The school that has the K Academy,
Mm-hmm.
that's 3 reading recovery teachers plus a literacy lessons teacher. So
Okay.
yes, and it's that principal wants another reading recovery teacher, the one that has 3.
Oh wow.
She values them tremendously. And I think because she values them, it helps the rest of the school value
Okay. Yeah. Well, that principal support, we know that from the
them.
I3
Yes.
grant. So,
Yes.
good. All right. See, that was, I've been not struggling with that sort of like, the level of coverage. How does it impact people? It doesn't really manifest itself in reading recovery.
No, but it does, I think, in school-wide data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, um,
But I think you've got to have that along with the principal in there too. It's not
yeah.
just reading recovery teachers, but it's also the principal.
Yeah. That's been a hard question to, I tried to explain it to people. I'm like, I don't think it's going to show what you think, what you really want it to show, but yeah, I'm all right. So you have a bullet here that says, discuss, like what to expect leadership within groups and then buildings, or
I think that's just mainly describing what we've just talked about.
okay,
Well, no, 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 no. Actually, my training class, that's what it is. My training
okay,
class that I had last year.
yeah,
It was 4 special ed, 2 reading recovery teachers, and then I trained a literacy coach. And it's overall a younger group. So with that group, I've talked a lot with them about leadership, that they cannot stay in their current roles until they retire, that they need to consider becoming principals, they need to
oh
be literacy
yes,
coaches, they need to become college professors, they need to be special ed directors. So I've had a lot of those conversations with them, to not expect this to be a career or path for them, that this is just because they have so much knowledge, they have to get themselves up into leadership positions. And they just look at me like, but this is only my 3rd year teaching. But it doesn't matter. You are incredibly knowledgeable, and you already are showing leadership within this group, and you've got to, go. So that's kind of what I've done with my more recent groups, is I expect them to become leaders, and I tell them so.
yeah, and get them out and get them to be
Yes.
those principals or what
Yes. Yes. The
that
decision
value.
makers. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that's good. Do you guys ever talk about like I don't know, like leadership skills, or I mean, or do you read books that talk about school
That
leadership or
we actually, and see, that's the problem when you have a training group. You have a group, and then you train another group, and then you train another group. They all experience different things.
uh-huh.
So the first group that was originally trained, they did have some cognitive coaching. Um, you know, there was somebody that came in from the district who was trained in cognitive coaching, and did some work with them on how to have conversations and to help people, if they were in kind of a supporting or a coaching role. But no, we haven't really read anything on leadership. They're just That's
Okay. No, now that I was thinking about it, I was like, I was gonna maybe ask the question if like somebody was like wasn't sure to how to go talk to their principal out about something or a classroom teacher. I was just thinking to myself, well, you probably just tell them just get in there and ask the question and just do it.
Well,
I mean, that's
yeah, and I think they also, they'll share and they'll ask each other questions like, "How did you do that?" "What did you say?" So if they know someone has done something that to them doesn't seem possible, they will go to that person and they might do it in front of the whole group. So tell us how that started. Tell us how you talked to your principal. So they help each other that way.
okay. Okay. So there hasn't been like, I mean, so you've formally, you've kind of formally have had a plan to encourage that leadership, but it's not like a hit them over the head with
No, no.
leadership
Mm-mm,
stuff.
mm-mm,
So,
mm-mm. For the first group that trained, it was more of a slower process. We really had to build efficacy and knowledge and confidence and those kind of things. And develop that leadership within, our smaller group so they could take it out to the bigger group.
okay. You've mentioned dyslexia and you have it on your list here.
Yeah.
What are we saying about dyslexia?
Um,
I don't mean to say it like that. How did that impact your groups? I know you said you had discussions about it in your inquiry groups, a whole.
yes, there was one group that's what they focused on and they took it to their school. But no, as a group, because we live in a more affluent district, so there's quite a few kids that go outside of our schools to get assessed and they come back, being labeled as dyslexic. So
Yeah.
we had to really focus on what do we know about dyslexia? What is dyslexia? How can we be able to discuss it if it comes up with parents in our meetings and those kind of things. So we've done a lot of work and research on dyslexia. And so we spent a whole year with Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz and then coordinating it with literacy lessons and finding lots of, places that they both align with each other. So that if a parent comes in and wants to talk to their reading recovery teacher about dyslexia, the things that are in literacy lessons, we know where it is in the Overcoming Dyslexia book. So they can pull up that Overcoming Dyslexia book and have really knowledgeable conversations with parents.
Oh, okay. Good. Um, all right. And then you have listed down here the share fair.
Yes. And
What is that?
we're getting ready to have our 6th annual share fair. So since we're a larger district with teachers, we cannot afford to send all of the reading recovery teachers to the conference in Columbus.
Ah,
So what we decided to do 6 years ago was the teachers had to develop a proposal of what they wanted to go to the conference and learn. And then they submitted their proposal. And we usually take about 8 teachers. So that's usually about 4 sessions. So we have a whole day that's like a mini conference where the teachers, plan a session to share with the other teachers that may have or may not have gone to the Reading Recovery Conference, and we'll invite literacy coaches and interventionists and principals and assistant principals and other people that can come to our share fair. But it's just a day-long event of sessions that are based on information, and if possible they try to tie several sessions together that they went to. But they are expected to stand and present to their peers for about 45 minutes to an hour. And it used to be they were always in teams.
uh-huh.
Last year we had one teacher that did it by herself. This year we have 2 teachers that are doing it by themselves.
Oh, wow.
So they are growing in their confidence and their leadership there. And I have them. I've been really encouraging them to try to get involved at the state level to present information at the Kentucky Reading Association conference, which I did have maybe 2 teachers last year that did that. So taking their share fair presentations, turning it into a proposal for the Kentucky Reading Association conference. And
Okay.
we're working on some teachers, these second grade teachers, the ones that worked with the second grade team, bringing it to the national conference. So
Okay. Um, so So when when did you kind of start this like effort? How many years ago have you like really started this effort?
What effort?
This effort to get them to be leaders. I mean,
From the beginning.
from the okay,
Yeah, from the beginning.
and well, and you were just telling me you're starting to really see the fruits of this, though. You were saying,
Yes, because I think they see themselves as knowledgeable, and I think their schools value their knowledge and their expertise, and I think they're sought out by teachers and the administration, in most buildings, as a resource, and they're not just that teacher down the hall that fixes kids and it's really expensive. We're still considered expensive, but I think we've, done well to be seen as indispensable.
right? Yeah, yeah. You have that much wider impact than
Mhm,
just
mhm.
those kids
Yeah,
you're
I
working
think,
with.
yeah, it can be painful for some schools if they lost their reading recovery teacher.
Yeah. So, but you were then talking about, I mean, it's impacted what you've had to do. I mean, so like 6 years ago, like what was your time like being a teacher leader? I mean, what
It
would
was very
I don't want to
difficult.
say what was the typical day, but what were you
Oh
doing?
gosh, I don't know, but I know that I this has been my slowest year yet, if I'm honest. But it's also coming off of 2 years of two different training classes. So, but I feel like my teachers, they still seek out help if they need help, but I think they also use themselves as resources. But I think, I don't know, I feel like our discontinuing rates are stronger. I feel like data across the grade levels are becoming stronger because of their impact. So,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
guess I think where I'm trying to go is that I
yeah,
think you were telling me that like instead of it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning that you want to be you want to be the foundation on the bottom
right,
supporting your
right.
teachers, and you don't want to be the herder at the front of them that's tugging them along to
No,
get them to do stuff. So it sounds, I mean, like initially with the book studies and this, you were a
no,
little
I
bit
was.
a little
Oh,
bit at the front
I was,
pulling.
I was. Yes, but like my training classes, I pay attention. Am I the one that's always asking questions, or do they ask questions? And how many of them will talk before I need to say something?
Hmm.
So I really try to take my voice out of it as much as possible because they need to hear each other's voices and they need to use their own voices within our group so that then they're more confident about using their voices within their buildings.
Yeah. And now it sounds like you've really kind of reached that, you're just there to support. You're a base
Right.
more than
Yes.
anything
Yes.
else.
And I mean, I think I knew that vintage sites a lot of times because I think we're in that category. I don't see my teachers being complacent. I feel like they're more activists. They're incredibly skilled and they know what they're doing and they're confident. And I think they see themselves as valuable within their buildings too.
Yeah. I mean, so now do you also find that um as a teacher leader yourself, do you have more time to spend with administrators or to do those non academic or teaching things that you might have been doing 4 or 5 years ago? And
Well, I feel like what I've had more time for this year is my own students. Um,
ah,
because, my data tells a story too. And whenever I'm out helping teachers and putting out fires and, going to observe lessons for their behind the glass because they're in a training class, my data really suffers. But I feel like this year, what I've honestly been able to focus on more are the students that, are my responsibility to teach. But then I've actually been able to work with teachers in the building that I'm placed in. Um, so I feel like
s-
I'm being used in my building more than I normally was before because I was always out.
yeah, no, I think I like my mind just like gets it now. Is that like you were that person putting out the fires with the principal or trying to get something with the second grade class, but now your teachers are doing that. They are just doing that, and you're there in reserve in case they
Right.
need
Right.
your
Right. Yeah.
expertise. So yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah. I mean, not that we don't ever want to always go out and talk to school administrators, but
Yes, I'm actually getting ready to go on that tour
oh,
with our site coordinator. She's also our elementary level director, but we try to go out once a year and just meet with principals and find out what they need and how we can support and share data with them. So that is something we're getting ready to do, but it's actually in conjunction with the elementary level director, who's our site director, which I find to be helpful to have her support as well.
okay. We talked briefly about or you mentioned the Kentucky Reading Association conference. You mentioned that your teachers, some of them were preparing proposals for that and stuff. I didn't know if you wanted to say any more about that or.
Well, that's just, what I keep encouraging them. So after this share fair, because it's actually March 21st, I think, that will be very much promoted with the group that they need to, okay, now take this to the larger level. And I had some teachers that I encouraged to, submit a proposal last year to the Kentucky Reading Association conference, and they didn't, but they attended. And then they were like, wow, we could have done better than some of the sessions we went to. So, I mean, I think that's what they needed to see was that, yes, sometimes I think it's hard for teachers to believe in themselves. And so they went and they were like, yeah, we really should have presented. So I think they'll definitely be presenting. And that's also the same group I'm hoping will turn it into a national conference proposal as well. So we'll see.
Okay.
Not this year, next year.
Okay. I also skipped over the Camp Literacy Live. You'll have to tell me what that is.
Camp Literacy Live has been in the district, and I'm not sure, 6-7 years, but it is something that they do in conjunction with United Way. They provide a lot of the funding for it, but the reading recovery teachers are the ones that do it, and it's targeted to students that are leaving kindergarten going into first grade. So, in an attempt to give them a jump start on reading and literacy before they hit first grade in reading recovery, then they invite students, and it also helps combat the summer slide. But it's pretty much all run by reading recovery teachers. So they'll have individual lessons with kids, but then they'll do small group lessons, and they call them cabins. So there's usually 3 to 4 reading recovery, sometimes just a classroom teacher in a room with about 12 to 16 kids. So they get a lot of one-on-one attention that way. But we've had good data from that as well.
Okay. And then here is the last point. I get, you talk, maybe you've got some, you don't have to name names, but like success stories that people that have moved on. You've now had people move on into other roles. Like what other roles have they?
I've had a few that have moved on to be literacy coaches or an instructional coach. And then I have one I know that's going to be an adjunct professor, which I've also been doing myself. And then, just facilitating those continuing ed courses for teachers as well.
All right. Well, anything else you want to share? I mean, or
I'm just really glad that I was able to learn from other people and to realize, being there almost myself as a reading recovery teacher, what could happen so that whenever I started with a fresh site, I could possibly, put my teachers on a different trajectory along the way. And I think I was successful, with the vintage site and developing and growing them as leaders.
This whole rotating teachers out has been a common theme with people. I've been participating with the group of people that have been working with the Carnegie Institute for the Advancement of Teaching. And this whole notion of, rotating the reading recovery teachers back out into the school has been a common theme that's been mentioned a lot, that, don't just put them in there and let them rot in there, get them out into the school and get that knowledge. They may initially sort of balk at it, but it has much bigger benefits.
Yes.
And everything. So
yeah. And I think it also helps, the district see them as a resource, and whenever budget cuts are discussed, because because actually that reading academy I talked about before, they didn't collect the data like we have with IDEC.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have a new he's a newer superintendent. So whenever it came time and he's looking at budgets, he actually cut the reading academy from the budget, but yet he kept reading recovery on board and, agreed to a training class the following year. And
Wow.
he attributed it to our data. He's like,
Wow.
y'all have data, and that's one reason why, it was our data, but I think it was also the fact that principals value their reading recovery teachers as well and wanted to add these teachers to their buildings. So, yeah, that's one thing that's helped us stay alive as well.
All right. I'm going to try to sum this all up in 20 seconds, and you tell me if you completely agree with me or disagree with me here.
Okay.
Is that so? I mean, your effort to get your teachers to become leaders amongst their schools kind of had, I'm going to say, a two-pronged approach to it. One, where you, in your monthly professional development or PD classes, you guys, you force them to start leading those and encouraging them to leading those. And then it's also creating and pushing them into opportunities outside of that group to go and share the knowledge and get up in front of people and to work with other people. I mean, that was kind of the general strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm the mother bird pushing them out of their nest.
Excellent. That was an even better analogy. That took like 2 seconds to say. Thanks, Heather. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So, all right. So Heather, well, thank you for joining me here on I Love Data Fridays in our session of How Do You Do Data. I appreciate you sharing this experience with everybody. I know you had told me earlier you weren't sure if anyone was going to be interested, but I've actually got a couple emails at the help desk wondering when this episode was going to come out. So people want to know.
Yay.
So,
all right, good.
So thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. I hope it's helpful to somebody.
All right. So we will talk to you later.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
All right, there you go. That concludes our interview with Heather Garland, teacher leader from Oldham County, Kentucky. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've learned a lot from listening from that. Hey, just before we go, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to our YouTube channel, just head on over there and mash that subscribe button and get all the notifications about all of our I Love Data Fridays and other videos that come out from the International Data Evaluation Center. And I'm going to go ahead and cue the outro music, and I will say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, thanks you once again for listening to another episode of I Love Data Fridays. So good to have you here. And hey, we will talk data to you later.